Town Trust at 7:17, call meeting to order.
Okay, this meeting is
Being recorded.
being recorded. Present are Commissioners
Vincent Roy.
Kevin Rudden and our able clerk, Dan Byer. I apologize for delaying the meeting. Why don't we skip down to our guest star? We'll do the.
I was just that, Cap, yes, good call.
So we're going to skip down to old business in our agenda.
So we have with us tonight Jack, and we have representatives from Wood and Curran, Dan Scott, and you know all the places.
Scott Sabucci, Dan Scott, and Greg McNeil.
Okay.
I can't even move at this distance. And then we get Jack Hunter and Dylan home in town as well.
Dylan is here from planning as well. Good afternoon or evening, Kevin. So, Kevin, I asked Woodward and Curran, or Dan did, to give you an update. You will hear a similar presentation that Vin had the opportunity of hearing. He had to leave a little early. So at the tail end of this presentation, actually, Vin will hear some additional information. I think the bottom line is the news is very good and things are going very well. It always takes longer than Jack would like, but hey, that's the way it is. So to keep it going, I'll give it to Scott.
Yeah, I think we had a really good meeting yesterday. Kind of talked with Vin as kind of the liaison from the Water Commission, and so looking forward to giving a little bit more of an update. Kevin, you hearing this for the first time and just getting some of the high level details, and like Jack said, good news from the field work that we did under the previous phase of work, which is called phase 3. And then we can talk about what we're going to be looking into as we, embark on phase 4, which we're still kind of finalizing the scope, but we have a really good sense of what it's going to include, and that will run over the next year. So I'll send it over to Dan, our project manager, and Greg, our project engineer, and we'll share a quick PowerPoint, go through some things, and share some of the details. So.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to come and give you an update. So let me just pull this up as a full screen PowerPoint. Okay. So this is a summary of our work for phase 3 and talking through phase 4 scoping that we're preparing now, and just long-term overall. Where the direction we're going with this project, we definitely have some good news to share, as Scott mentioned a second ago. So first on our agenda, we'll step through some more historical information, just to give you all a reminder of some of the previous work we did before the prolonged pumping test. Greg's going to run through that along with the prolonged pumping test results. As we go through these first 2 agenda items, please stop us at any time if you wish to get some additional detail. We're going to try to go through that pretty quickly to leave time to go through these topics down here. So with that, Greg will take over, and I will step back in once we get to next steps.
Hey, everybody.
All right.
So the first thing that we did this year was cut a path to access the drill site on 214 Providence Street. Cut down a couple of trees and built a gravel access path off of the driveway at 198A Providence. So we can drive pickup trucks back there now. This is done so we could get access for our drill rigs and for our equipment for prolonged pumping test. I'll just quickly summarize some of the previous investigations that have been done here. All those dots in blue is a historical investigation from 1979, extended into 1986. The red dots that you see at the center of the screen, that's the investigation that Woodard and Curran has been doing since 2023. So a lot of this really kicked off in 2023 when we drilled our first boring on the site. I think these slides might be out of order. I think the next slide is the 2023. Okay, no, sorry, I got myself a little confused. It kicked off in October 2023 with our first borings at 214 Providence Street. That was when we first identified the potential of this site for further investigation. We came back in April 2024 and drilled 6 more borings. At that point, we had identified through those 6 borings 3 potential sites to install full-scale production wells. In October 2024, we expanded the drilling program with 6 more borings to establish more monitoring well locations for a prolonged pumping test. After that point, we submitted a request for site exam to Mass DEP. Next slide, please. So generally what we saw here in the course of our drilling and a series of short-term 4-hour pumping tests was generally favorable geology with finer coarse materials in the shallower strata, progressing to a coarser material deeper down. You can see in the photo at the center of this slide here, at the left, you can see a tan fine sand. And as you progress to the right, we're getting deeper and deeper, and you can see that there is a transition to a coarser, more gravelly material. So that material is water bearing and has proven to be fairly productive. We did some initial water quality sampling at this point and detected pretty high levels of iron and manganese. And we did also detect PFAS at this point, which was definitely concerning, but we knew that we would need to that water quality needed to be confirmed by taking a sample after a prolonged pumping test. Next slide, please. Again, this is just another recap of all the wells that have been drilled in this area dating back to 1979. The dots right at the center of the map there is Woodard and Curran's investigation. And in particular, the blue dots that you see there, those are the proposed pumping sites. So that is where full-scale production wells would be installed. So we compiled all this information and submitted a request for site exam to Mass DEP. DEP visited the site and conducted a site exam and inspected our pumping test experimental setup, and they gave us approval to move ahead with the test. So in December 2024, we were able to proceed with a prolonged pumping test. So at the 3 locations that you see at the map on the right, we installed 3 2.5-inch test wells at each of those locations. So that's a total of 9 2.5-inch test wells. At each of those sites, 2 of those wells were pumping wells and 1 well was a monitoring well. So that gave us a total of 6 pumping wells. These wells were all manifolded together and pumped with a single centrifugal style pump, and water was discharged about 500 feet to the south directly into the Mill River with erosion controls in place to prevent the stream bank from eroding. Our drilling contractor was DLMR. They drilled all the borings and set up and ran the pumping test. The test ran for 6 straight days, 220 gallons a minute at the test rate. After the 6th day, we submitted our data to Mass DEP, and we got written approval from them to shut down the test after we observed stability in the water levels in the area at the center of the well field. Just a couple of photos showing the setup. So you can see the manifold in the center with the 6 hoses coming out of it. Those are connecting to 2 pumping wells at each of the 3 proposed sites for full-scale wells, all of them coming together and then running through that trailer-mounted centrifugal pump. And after the pump is where we equipped a sample tap so that we could collect water quality samples at the conclusion of the test. So this graph here is just an example of the data that we were collecting. This is depth to water measured at test well 4-24, which is near the center of the well field. So this is the well that we had previously identified as the well we would use to identify stability. Looking at this graph, it's pretty obvious where at what point did we start pumping. As you progress from left to right, that's time. As you're moving to the right, we're proceeding through the pumping test. So you can see we turned the pumps on and water levels dropped immediately from about 6 feet below ground to about 11 feet below ground. And then we saw water levels steadily declining over the period of 6 days. And in the last 24 hours before we shut down, you can see the water levels were largely stabilized, not really moving that much anymore. And so once we had achieved stability, we were able to shut the test down. One thing you might notice here is there's a little bit of a jog in the graph there, where the water level suddenly jumps up and then jumps back down again. That was due to a leak that was discovered in the manifold that impacted our flow rate. So the contractor estimated that we were pumping only about 150 gallons a minute for that period. So we lost some drawdown. But once we fixed the leak and got the test back on track, we recovered the drawdown that we lost and then achieved stability soon after. So the results of all this in terms of quantity of water. Back when we did our initial 4-hour pumping tests, our short-term tests that we did starting in October 2023 and up through April 2024, the data from that test was indicating to us an estimated yield of this site at 609 gallons a minute, or 0.877 MGD. After running the prolonged pumping test, where we pumped all 3 locations at the same time at a combined rate of 220 gallons a minute, we're now estimating an estimated yield of the site at 546 gallons a minute. While that number is great, the actual, what we're going to recommend as the approvable yield for the site is going to be limited to 440 gallons per minute. The pumping test is indicating that there's more water there, but it will be difficult to access for regulatory reasons. Because this aquifer is located in close proximity to the Mill River, we will be limited in our approvable yield by the 7Q10 flow of the Mill River. So the 7Q10 flow is the flow rate in the river during the 7 driest days of a 10-year period. So it is a statistical measure, and it is a very low flow, and generally a groundwater withdrawal in close proximity to a river like this cannot exceed 50% of the 7Q10 flow. The reason for that is that withdrawals greater than that are anticipated to have deleterious effects on the stream, and thus that would represent sort of the maximum limit of what we could seek to extract here. There is more water there, theoretically, but in order to permit it, it would require a 15-day pumping test and extra permitting steps. And you would also need to demonstrate that you need the water. But at this point, we've calculated the town's estimated future peak demand of the priority areas that matter the most to the town. And that came out to 0.479 MGD. Since we're looking at a recommended approvable yield of 0.630 MGD, we're already there. So at this point, there isn't really any need to argue for pumping more than 50% of 7Q10 flow. But the option, I suppose, would be there in the future. So a really important aspect of this was to evaluate water quality. We really needed to make sure that the water that we're extracting here is suitable for use for public consumption. So we collected a raw water sample after 6 days of pumping. The table that you see here is not conclusive. We We ran a full battery of tests for basically almost every regulated chemical. We had no detection for synthetic organic contaminants, volatile organic contaminants, or radionuclides, which is very good news. That's the stuff that you absolutely do not want to see in your drinking water. The table on the left is secondary contaminants, and not all of them, but just a couple of the important ones. Particularly at the top, hardness was measured at 19.2 milligrams per liter, so this would be classified as soft water. So aesthetically, it's I didn't taste it, but I imagine it probably would taste pretty good. We were non-detect for copper and lead, also non-detect for iron, which is good news. And what the manganese detection was below the secondary limit of 0.05 milligrams per liter. Also non-detect for arsenic. One thing that we observed that was out of range is pH. Measured a pH of 6.14. The recommended limit is 6.5 to 8.5. It is likely that some pH adjustment is going to be needed here, especially as part of an overall corrosion control strategy for a distribution system. So along with pH, we measured alkalinity, which you can see there was measured at 11 milligrams per liter, which is low, which in this case is a good thing, because alkalinity is generally a measure of water's ability to resist changes in pH. So the fact that alkalinity is low means that it shouldn't be too difficult to change the pH, to modify it, to push it within that range. Also on here is carbon dioxide at 31 milligrams per liter. Potential pH adjustment strategy is to strip carbon dioxide using something like a pack tower aerator. By stripping carbon dioxide, you can raise pH. So the fact that there is some carbon dioxide there means that CO2 stripping is a potential pH adjustment strategy. We also did not detect any potassium. Potassium addition is also a strategy that could be used to adjust pH. You can push your pH up by adding potassium, and since you don't have any there, you wouldn't have to worry about potentially having too much potassium in your water. We measured 28.1 milligrams per liter of sodium, very standard for a groundwater supply. Sodium is naturally occurring, can't really get away from it. The limit for sodium is 20, but it's also not really a real limit. It's called an ORSG limit. It's the Massachusetts Office of Research and Standards. So that 20 is more of a recommendation. And if your water is over 20, then that carries with it usually a requirement just to notify folks. So if there was a water supplier operating in Mendon, you would be publishing consumer confidence reports on water quality. And so you would just have to put on that consumer confidence report a notification that the sodium levels of your water is higher than 20. So that's there for folks that need to be on a low sodium diet or have heart issues or things of that nature. So what we're looking at here.
Rick, can I stop you for a sec? We
Yep,
move on to the next
absolutely.
slide. So on the manganese, I see we're just below the standard. Is it going to be a recommendation maybe to do some green sand filtration for the manganese, or you think just let it slide right now until you cross that 0.05 limit?
It's likely that green sand treatment is probably going to be a good idea here.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a little more when we talk about our MPA testing. But basically, we found iron bacteria in the water. So while you're non-detect for iron now, you may not be in the future.
Okay.
So green sand treatment for iron and manganese is likely something that would be helpful here.
Okay, candidly, having iron and manganese is standard for most of the wells in town.
Yes.
So, that's no surprise.
Well, it's a public water supply. We get it.
Well, I know, but that
I know what you're saying.
that is detected here is not a surprise.
Yeah.
In fact, I expected a higher level.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were pretty pleased when we saw ND for iron. I definitely wasn't expecting that.
It's great. Okay.
Just a quick question on the sodium. So you notify people there's sodium in the water. What if they do have heart condition or something like that?
Or
What do they do? Drink bottled water? Or?
Greg, do you want to expand on kind of what the relationship is to the concentrations and the amount of water you're drinking a day? What that would relate to relative to like a normal diet?
Yes. So we actually encountered this fairly recently with another supplier that, they had sodium levels that were similar to yours. And ultimately, if you drank a regular amount of water in your day, 8 ounce glasses at 28.1 milligrams per liter, that is the equivalent level of salt of basically like a handful of Lay's potato chips. So we're not really talking about.
You answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, in terms of what people would do, it's just important that they know, so that way they can limit their intake if they choose to.
Okay.
it's a secondary contaminant. We don't have to do anything about it. Just notify the public what we need to do.
Right. He just gave me the example of what I needed to know.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Keep going.
Anything else on this slide, Greg?
No, I don't have anything on this slide. Any other questions about this water quality data?
Maybe, I don't know if it's on the next slide, but just to touch on the PFAS and all that.
I was going to ask if that showed up next.
Oh, the next slide.
Yeah, PFAS gets its own slide. So we did detect PFAS in April 2024 after a 4-hour pumping test. But in our prolonged pumping test, after pumping for 6 days, we didn't detect anything. We were non-detect for all compounds under the EPA 537.1 method. So it's good news. We didn't detect any PFAS. So that can only be a good thing.
That's a great thing.
It's a great thing, yeah. I was going to say, when you mentioned you found it originally, I was like, God, that stuff is everywhere.
Yeah, literally.
Yes. So it does sort of beg the question, where did it come from the first time? Like, how come we detected it in April but not in December? And the truth is, we don't really know. I would say it is possible that because we pump for 6 days, that we just achieve more dilution, so that makes us less likely to detect PFAS. On our next slide, we're going to talk about surface water quality because we took a sample.
Greg, I got another question for you having to do with PFAS. You guys use the same lab to do the analytics for you? Because I know there are some variations. Because I do PFAS testing all the time, and from what I understand, I use PACE now, but people were telling me that Rhode Island Analytical now does it, and the results are a little bit different from what PACE's results are. And that's the only reason why I asked this question. You use the same lab that you had from the first time as you did for this sampling?
Yes, we use PACE for both rounds.
Okay. Only need to know. Okay.
Kevin, I should interject at the meeting. Vin, I don't know if you were gone yet. I brought up the notion that as we get closer to developing a treatment facility, should we make it flexible with the knowledge that PFAS could be there eventually?
So I understand for that, and I remember engineering friends over here stating that a facility, you would make it big enough in order to house equipment, or at least allow for the expansion
Right.
to install equipment. But to put that stuff in now is almost like putting the cart before the horse.
Overkill at this point.
No,
Yeah,
but my point was just to make sure that the system we have is flexible and adjustable.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to the overarching thing we talked about was, there's the options of building a larger facility with potential to just expand it within the original envelope, or an option of a smaller facility with the option of making it in a way, constructing and designing in a way that you'd be able to easily remove a wall and extend the foundation. There's a couple different ways to create some resiliency, given the uncertainty of potential other contaminants, PFAS, or just anything in general that we might have to address long-term on the contaminant side that needs to be treated.
Can we build, and I should know this, but can we build all this treatment stuff within the zone 1 area right where the well is? I would think that you can. Or does
Yeah,
it
you,
have to-
you can
zone
build treatment
1?
plants within zone 1.
Okay. So it could be all part of the same building or adjacent to a building where the well house is or something?
Yep.
Okay.
So on the topic of PFAS, actually the next slide is, if we could go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I was a little confused. Well, we're going to get back to PFAS, but we'll just talk about this real quick. We had I'm sorry?
I was looking at the results guide. The presence of iron bacteria doesn't surprise me either. Given the wells in part of the town, the private wells, and the other stuff is good news.
Yes, non-detect for all the little bugs and critters. So the results of this MPA screening is that this groundwater supply is at low risk for groundwater under influence of surface water. This is good news. It sort of indicates that the water that we're pulling into the wells, it's not being induced from the stream. It's coming from the wider aquifer underneath the stream, as opposed to dewatering the stream. That is a concern not only ecologically but also for public health, because from stream that's where you get things that are on this list, like Giardia and Cryptosporidium and other things. But also, yes, iron bacteria was detected. That is something that is likely going to be a maintenance sort of pain point for these wells, as is very common in these types of water supplies. The wells are probably going to require fairly routine brushing and surging and cleaning in order to keep the iron bacteria off of the well screens. It's also worth mentioning too that this MPA analysis that we did was screening level only. These results could not be submitted to the state for any regulatory purposes, because MPA sampling has specific requirements in terms of the time of year when you collect the sample. But we did this as a screening tool so that we would want to know ahead of time what we're dealing with.
Greg, when would this come up again? Like, next year or the year after? When do you think we would do a test that would be at a level that'd be acceptable to regulators to accept?
Most likely, probably after things have gone online. Typically, MPA testing is done on the system when it is in routine operation. Once you have gotten things working within the patterns and operations of day-to-day use, that is typically when you want to do your MPA sampling. So this is something that probably isn't going to come up again for a long time. But that's again why this was a good opportunity to run this test, so that we could have something of an understanding going forward.
Yeah, Greg, like you said too, the state's gonna require 2 sets of samples, one in the fall, one in the spring, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Um,
And yeah, and they would also need to be done on the final production wells. The final production wells need to be installed before you could do MPA testing again.
Right, yeah.
Thanks, Greg. You ready for the next slide?
Yes, next slide, please. So this is a gigantic table. I'm not going to run through all of this, but essentially this is a comparison between groundwater and surface water. When we collected our groundwater sample after pumping for 6 days, at the same time we collected a sample from the Mill River right nearby. So we got 2 samples of water on the exact same day at the same time, one groundwater, one surface water. The big takeaway here is PFAS. So while yes, we were non-detect in the well, we detected all sorts of PFAS in the river. So it is there. There is PFAS flowing right by this site day and night. This stuff, it does have the potential to get bound up in river sediments, things of that nature. So there is PFAS contamination in close proximity to these wells. Now, since it seems like we're not groundwater under influence of surface water, it doesn't seem like we're pulling that water into our wells. So the risk of contamination by PFAS from surface water is low. It's not zero. It is there. I think that's pretty much all I really want to talk about on this slide. Any other questions about surface water versus groundwater?
Now, very interesting though.
No,
This
given
total
what-
is still below
Doesn't
the limit.
surprise me.
No.
Oh, yes, Dan, I think you're about to say the what we detected in surface water was 15.3, measured as PFAS 6. So for the state of Massachusetts, the limit is 20 for PFAS 6. So technically, the surface water is below the current regulatory limit. So that is nice, but regulatory limits can always change.
I just wanted to make sure we pointed out kind of where it stood within the regulatory space.
We talked about the last meeting too, the state limit's gonna change.
So is the federal.
Yeah, Trump may do away with it.
I was about to say, we're lucky we still have the EPA on day 17. I'm sure that's next on the list.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's go on.
Okay, next
Scott,
steps.
Does anyone have any final questions for Greg regarding anything he presented before we start talking next steps here?
No, just that I'm really impressed with what I've seen so far. You guys have done such a great job. No doubt. I am very impressed with this. Good.
Yeah, it's
good.
a very, very exciting phase of work for us. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
stuff's out of our hands, and all we can do is try to do everything the right way, make sure we get the results and get the approvals. But yeah, the results were good.
No question. I was gonna find some money.
Now, that's another thing that changed in January.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this slide is just a diagram showing at a very high level the steps we need to get through in order to get final approval and move forward with actually servicing the town with potable water. So we have check marks, and obviously those are indicative of the steps we've gotten through. So that these are a lot of the steps that we were recently doing over the past year. So getting the permit in place, the request for site exam, doing our engineering work leading up to that, doing our regulatory work leading up to that, and getting to the point that we submitted to DEP and got approval and conducted the tests. So this is kind of the line in the sand where we reached on our side of the table. We have some items down here in orange that are more germane to the town's efforts. This was obviously a collaborative effort, but these are some of the things that are really dependent on the town to fulfill with our assistance as a team as we move towards this ultimate goal. So we got the zone 1 control at the last town meeting. We can't read over that, sorry. We got zone 1 control, passed the groundwater protection bylaw at the last town meeting. And then the last big piece in this area here is development of a municipal water company business plan. So I'll step through that on the next slide, but you know, that's a very important step, and it's going to involve a lot of thought in order to fulfill. So this was just a plan for zone one control, and now the next step is to take control. So then I'll go into more detail in the next slide, but yeah, the next big step we're going to be working towards is a final source report to submit to Mass DEP, and getting approval through those steps that we're going to take. And then ultimately we're going to be preparing design. So that would be a final design, and then constructing the source and all the infrastructure associated with that. And then there's another step of really fulfilling the obligation of creating a staffing plan and hiring the people that need to be in place in order to operate, maintain, and run a water business enterprise.
And I assume that ties directly to the business plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be a key piece of it, is really figuring out what staffing's required. If there's pieces of it that are going to be subbed out to, say, a water operating company, or if it's going to be fully staffed in the house. So these are the main components of phase 4, which we're planning on completing over the next calendar year. So the first step, which we've already begun with, was the remaining funds from phase 3, which we're going to take as far as it can and then continue on as necessary under phase 4. But this prolonged pumping test report is going to summarize our work we did on the prolonged pumping test, and it's going to form the basis of required analysis for the source final report. So we'll prepare this report, and then its components of that are going to be baked into the next item here, which is the source final report. So that includes a lot of different elements, including the BRP WS19 permit, a pumping test analysis, a zone 2 delineation, which it could potentially require a 3D groundwater model, a groundwater well program, wellhead protection, non-zoning and zoning controls, a capacity plan, an environmental notification form, which we've already gotten started on that under the last phase. So that's progressed. Groundwater withdrawal permit and water supply business plan. So parts of that plan include a draft customer database, an expected customer hookup, a utility rate forecast, and a capital plan. Also, under this phase, as part of this final source report, there's the two biggest requirements outside of all of this is really starting to design, and in order to get approval of the source, pretty shovel ready. So this is going to be an important step for us to really start going through the nuts and bolts of an approach on our design and starting to pull together some high level drawings and plans to convey our design intent. So it's going to include the water source well, the treatment building, and then civil site activities, including the design at a preliminary level of the site, so the fencing and the roadway and access and the grading we envision for the site as a whole, and utilities that need to come into the site. And then also, obviously, the transmission and distribution piping layout. So this will really help us to refine cost as well. So that'll be another element of this preliminary design. We're going to prepare a preliminary design report, which will include both, descriptions of all this and how we're planning on fulfilling the design, but also through those exercises, it's going to help us really try to hone in our costs, reduce our contingency to some capacity, and really help us be able to figure out what the cost might be, and then looking at the customer base and figuring out how we make this water utility a solvent business. We'll also look at the permitting requirements that are going to be needed during construction, and then those conceptual drawings and figures I mentioned. Another subtask that'll be directly going on in parallel with this is a hydraulic model. So the idea is to create a network expansion in a phased manner, and be able to start to size the pipes, size the water tank that we may need, and overall just really get a better feel for the nuts and bolts of what this might look like, and be able to. This will obviously feed into the costs once we get an understanding of the size requirements. And then another important item we're going to be working on is the additional financial planning and analysis. So last phase, in the prior phase, we did create a financial model to at least get a baseline on some scenarios on how to make this affordable. So we're going to continue that effort. We also are working collaboratively with the town with some of their key resources to try to define the customer base a little bit better. We have a pretty good understanding of the existing customer base with the existing customers that are tied into the Hopedale system. So that would be, obviously the starting point for a customer base, but starting to get a better understanding of where development might happen, what type of development, and working with the town towards trying to figure out some inputs we can put in that are pretty well informed and everybody's comfortable with. And then also reviewing funding opportunities. So what are the ways that we can supplement some of the capital costs associated with this, and also figuring out what the O&M costs are going to be. We came up with a number, but we're going to continue to refine that, and just work with the town overall to work towards coming up with some scenarios that we think are realistic and can help inform the business plan that we need to prepare. So I know that was a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions on some of these tasks and what some of the responsibilities might be between us and the town, and how we work through this next phase of work?
Question I have is, do we have enough funding to fund all of phase 4?
That was my question.
So we have 410,000 through the last grant we received. The idea is going to be to maximize that funding and push these are all key components to take forward. So it's going to be a matter of deciding how far we can take this with this funding. And we're going to submit another grant application this spring in the hopes that we can continue to move this project along on all grant funding.
Yeah, because phase 4 is a big scope. It's going to require a lot of time, a lot of effort.
Yeah, and the idea too is that we're gonna the main components we can see certainly still being having loose ends associated with it is going to be the design piece, because we're only doing preliminary design. This thing needs to be fully designed in order to get the final approval to move forward with construction. And then the business planning side of things, just realistically, there's going to be some uncertainty on certain aspects of it that just need to be revisited and continued to be refined in order for everyone to be comfortable and move forward with the project.
So as far as the business model goes, this would be a really small system. Obviously, you're going to have a licensed operator in order to take lead on on doing the day-to-day operations of this and submitting all the reports and all the things that are gonna have to happen. Once we've got something in place, I'm just wondering could you guys give options for just outsourcing, hiring somebody in-house for the town and what that would cost, legacy costs, including benefits, salary benefits and all that stuff. Would one person suffice or would it be two? This is what obviously you guys.
Yeah.
And then option B would be outsource it to somebody like RH White or I know there were outside companies that run public water supplies. It is an option for the town.
Woodard and Curran.
Yeah, Woodward and Curran. Yeah, do you guys do that?
We operate 90 drinking water, wastewater plants, stormwater pump station plants across the country.
Scott, I had no idea. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep.
So
Yeah, we got a
you
big
guys
O&M
would be an option.
business side.
Yeah, okay.
So that'll definitely be something through the next phase that we have a lot of very useful resources, obviously, given our presence in the operations market. So we'll definitely be tapping into those resources and picking their brains on what is this going to take? How many people? Like what are the problems the town could face by jumping into this? We'll have a pretty good feel for that, I think, by the end of this phase, and then it'll be a continued thing where we continue to work with the town and figure out what the best plan to provide reliable water to the town and at a cost-efficient manner.
Yeah, or you do a hybrid where you've got a licensed operator on staff, or you outsource water main breaks, similar to
There
what
has to
we
be
do now.
redundancy,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
We
Whether they look at partnerships with highway towards the DPW direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But getting back to my original question, so it sounds like 400,000 is not gonna be enough to do this whole phase. What are your thoughts on that?
I just pulled together the scope, and the next exercise is going to be to work between myself and Greg and really price all this out, figure out what's realistic to do, and figure out within our scope how we just put in exactly what we think the limitations might be.
Okay. Are we looking at any other grants that may be available for us to go after right now, or I know you guys have resources where you.
Well, they just mentioned that they're gonna apply for one.
Right.
It's
So
the one
next
stop.
step would be the one stop, which
Okay.
So it's like,
we'll submit our expression of interest this spring and then submit the full application mid-year, and then should find out next in the fall timeframe regarding awards. And then similar to this past year, we went through contracting at the beginning of December.
Yeah. How about the housing choice grants too? Those, because this type of project really fits.
I think, is that all within that same portal? Or is
Yeah.
that just-
They've
so we
restructured the one stop, and you put in your expression of interest and submit your application, and then you get put into a bucket that they think is the best location for the nature of the project.
Yeah, so this will be the fourth year in a row we write a one-stop grant application with the town, and the first two that you all received were housing choice grants. This phase 4 is funded through the Rural Development Fund, but all applied to the one-stop grant application portal. And like Dan's saying, they kind of put you into whichever program fits you best. And so, if we put another application in this year, which we will, and if it's awarded, we'll find out it could be housing choice again, it could be rural development. And then we do want to focus on, once we start to shift gears and really reach that construction funding time frame, we'll go through one stop again and look at MassWorks grants. So, and hopefully target and focus towards MassWorks grants.
Yeah, this is great. We got to keep this going. No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that the track record of getting all these grants, it's great, and it provides a lot of momentum for our future applications. It's only gonna enhance our project if we keep getting them. They're
How's the
not
select-
gonna want it to stop once they've
How's the
already
select
made the
board?
investment.
Select board 100% on board with this as well, I would think.
I would assume so.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I was really hoping Jeremy was gonna join us too.
Yeah, but, okay.
Unless they're not able to.
legally and technically, it's not up to them.
No, but ultimately you want
Oh,
as
we
much
want
town
them on
support.
board, but-
You want,
Yeah, I mean, we all need to be collaborative, but
yeah. No, I know we don't need it.
So we know one of them is very passionate about it. I think the others are interested,
Yeah.
because he was part of this way back.
yeah, and as long as, at some point, there's gonna be town money needed to
No question.
be part of this, and,
So they got a town meeting, appropriate funds, yeah.
fortunately, or hopefully, we might have a few more businesses in the 140 area by then, in a year or two,
Yeah.
where we have some more tax revenue coming in.
All right.
All right.
Anything else with this, or is this where you guys conclude?
Just had a few more slides here, just some reminders of the initial phasing we have mapped out. This is from phase two. So
Yeah.
this is a little dated, but based on feedback from the town and the team, we're talking about constructing our source and running a pipe up this way up to Route 16, hooking into the Route 16 subsystem, and then over here to the Cape Road existing subsystem. And something that did come up at yesterday's meeting is, this being such a big priority, this is a short stretch of pipe, so it could be
We've
a
got to get off
situation where we
Hopedale.
go ahead.
Yeah.
We've got to get off Hopedale, and as
Right.
far as this board is concerned, that's the number one priority.
Yeah, exactly. The
They're
challenges would
raising
be,
the rates so high, which we have to pass along, that in another year or two, we're gonna reach the point where it's gonna be cheaper for people on our system to get off and drill a well.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they're almost there now. I mean, we just have to keep passing the cost along, but we're getting to the point where candidly, it's gonna be cheaper for folks like me to, drill a well and get off the system.
right, yeah, our team understands that pretty well after looking at all the numbers. It's pretty
And we
daunting, the pricing.
Yeah, and we have business demand there that we can't meet.
The only drawback, well, I know, I totally agree with that too, Ken. But so you guys are talking about a tank up there up in North Ave, which is really far away. So,
I think the tank is by the park now. I think that was it's where where his cursor is.
Right
Well,
next to Nipmuc Pond.
okay, so that's a little bit close, okay.
Okay, the other issue is, you say Route 16 existing subsystem. Oakdale owns that.
Yeah.
I think the connection there is an interconnection with Hopedale is what the intent is. And
Okay.
Where that line is drawn, if it's drawn at the town line or Hopedale wants to keep those 15 customers,
Yeah, exactly.
that's a conversation.
Yeah, knowing them, they'll dump them back on us in 3 seconds.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
All right.
the challenge we're facing is elevation. This is the most
Yep.
conducive area for a tank.
It's the highest point in town.
So
North
one thing
Avenue
we were
is the
talking
highest
about,
point in town.
one thing we talked about at our meeting yesterday was, this is a pretty short stretch of pipe. So what we could do from a bidding perspective, procurement perspective, is put this as a bid alt and get pricing on it, because we could get very good pricing for this, and we're well within, the budget that we've put out. So there's a lot of options here, but
Yeah,
just priority wise, this is the way it was laid out a couple years ago.
no, I know. It's just, the way it was laid out a couple of years ago did not include our opinion, by the way, of the guys who run the system. Hopedale is basically extorting money from us like you wouldn't believe. So we gotta get off that system.
Understood.
And they'll be very happy too.
It would be, well, I don't know, it'd be a big cut in revenue.
We're giving them what they asked for.
Yeah.
This last slide is just a more high level schedule. It's all subject to change. It's going to be dependent on funding and regulatory approval. So there's a lot of unknowns here, but we've checked off a lot of boxes as we've talked about today, and we're moving in the right direction from
Sure.
transitioning to planning to putting some pipes in the ground and designing them and all that stuff that we're all excited about. So right now we're looking at trying to get through the design process and the permitting process over the next couple of years, depending on funding, and then hopefully moving into construction. This is probably more of a 2027 date. Greg, I don't know if you have any other opinions or Scott, but this was just a figure we pulled together a year ago.
Yeah.
It's still pretty close to the mark, but there's a lot of uncertainty, as I said. So, but
Yeah,
just to give you an
especially
overall idea of kind of where things are at.
Yep. No, I agree. 2027 especially if we're pursuing a one-stop grant application in 2026, that the funding might come through in fall of 2026, and construction at the earliest should probably start 2027, maybe more realistically, even 2028. So, yeah. We'll see.
But the idea here is just to keep pushing tasks forward in the most prioritized fashion possible and put ourselves in the best position possible to keep this schedule as short as possible, and all the while make sure we're not going too fast, especially on the business side of things.
Yeah, I agree. This is all good.
Yeah.
It's great work, folks. It's nice to see concrete things being achieved.
Yeah, I have no other questions. Questions I had, I
don't have any. I just want to say great work.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the whole report that you guys have done, so yeah. We'll stay ahead. I wish we had more money now, but it's gonna, yeah. Just keep sticking to it. Let's hopefully, fingers crossed, this is gonna happen down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for the support. Thanks for the engagement. And, we're plugging away, like you said, and it's slow and steady, but it's, but we're hitting milestones. Like you said, we're hitting big milestones, and the prolonged pumping test is a big one. So
if you had told me 4 or 5 years ago it would be at this juncture, I would have laughed at you. So I think it's moving along really well.
Yeah, Rome wasn't built in a day, so.
And, I hope we can just keep going.
yeah, and when I say we, it's Dan and Greg and Jenny from our team for sure. They're the ones plugging away at it. So,
But I mean, my biggest fear is at some point we run out of money and all this hard work goes nowhere.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
yeah, we're hitting, like we're saying, we're hitting checkpoints that there's things that you're reaching that you might not have ever reached before, that if it does get put on the shelf for 5 years or 10 years even, you get to start at a spot that you never reached before. So
That'd be you kids.
Because we basically have a viable source now, which is on paper, that's not something we've had. Even that 1980s report, I think they said, yeah, maybe, but it's not worth it.
But it's even beyond that. We're almost to the milestones with DEP.
Right.
These things all have to happen.
They have to happen, and you're gonna reach a point where so much is being achieved that you can't ignore it.
Exactly. And we're almost at that point now.
Right, I mean, from my feeling is, the end of phase 4, the momentum is there, that how do you ignore it?
It's not potential anymore. It's a source. It's a source.
It's a source. It's viable. We'll have estimates.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I say great work, because you've achieved what the three members of the committee and Dan could never have done on our own.
No way. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean it sincerely, you guys have done fantastic work. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. Terrific.
Yeah.
Welcome, that means a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, it takes a big team. Takes a big team. Our team, Jack and Dylan, what they've been doing, Dan, you all, you know, it's definitely a team
But as you
effort.
said, we're hitting milestones,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is you guys hitting milestones, so.
Yeah.
I just look at this as somebody who's lived in this town my entire adult life, you know, we're at a point I never dreamed of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Jack has been certainly a big part of this too.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Jack, if you're still on, we love you.
yeah, Jack's gone now.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
Jack
a-
and Dylan both had to drop off, but yeah, they've been doing a lot,
Yeah,
you know.
All right, guys, well, have a great night. Thank you. And I look forward to the
You as
next
well.
one.
Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you.
Yeah,
Good
thank
night.
you.
apologize for being late.
That's okay.
Oh, no problem.
All right, guys.
I do think, just so you know, at some point there probably will be a similar presentation of the select board. I did mention to Jeremy to let us know.
Not sign this. No, sorry. I want to plug out of here a little because I haven't had somewhere.
Okay, the rest of it should be super quick now.
All right, let me just, I'm gonna race through this.
There's some votes and then.
One,
You don't need, just the two signatures are fine.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, really, it's one thing,
Yeah,
everyone doesn't care, but might as well do it.
Let
right.
me race through this quickly.
Yeah.
We can't do the 5 minutes because Alan isn't here. And I wasn't, so I can't vote on them unless we evoke the principle of necessity, which is we can't approve it when I'm here.
I'd say vote them and get them out of the way, but it's up to you.
All right, can you make a motion to approve the 2 sets of minutes to December 5th and?
I move to approve the minutes from December 5th, 2024 and January 2nd, 2025. That's
Okay,
prepared by.
I'm gonna invoke the rule of necessity that would, the other member who needs to approve 2024 has not been able to appear tonight or the last meeting. And second your motion particularly on the 25th, I can't vote on the second, so it's been made and seconded.
All those in favor? Aye. Roy, aye.
Roy, aye, Red and I, those are done. We did the billing commitment. Can I give it a motion? Did you read the 2024 annual report that Dan sent out earlier?
I did.
Motion?
Motion to approve the report as written by Dan.
Second. Vote,
Roy, aye.
Red and I.
Okay, good.
We did the thing, and in the interest of timing, can we just jump down? I think the other stuff can hold. The infrastructure, can that hold for now?
Yeah, most of those are placeholders. I do have one quick question
And-
about 23 Cape though,
Okay,
actually so the hydrants, there's gonna be hydrants around the building that are part of their pressurized system.
correct,
There's gonna be additional public hydrants that are on the water main.
yes,
Do we care if they're all just the same color? Do we have any preference?
I don't
Or they
care.
just leave?
No, actually, the ones that are dedicated.
Fire said they didn't care, but
Well, it's really up to the fire department, but they should.
The fire department, the rest of ours in town are red, so the public,
my only concern would be like, if you opened one of those hydrants in their loop, you might trigger their system.
That's the
If
thing,
somebody's flushing hydrants and doesn't pay attention, it might be helpful to like make those ones blue or something.
well, that's theirs.
Yeah, to be like, these are different.
What I was gonna say is
Ours are red.
ours should be red, theirs should be a different color.
And the reason being, if somebody was to crack a hydrant, because ultimately it's all tied into our system, but
Right,
they've got a booster pump to their system.
right, and if
Yeah,
you crack it, it lowers it, it triggers.
It's gonna draw a ton of water, yeah. for our
Okay,
system. So that's why it needs to
That's,
have.
you know, this would be contract stuff out too.
okay.
So I don't know what color our hydrants are, but it should have it.
Technically but yeah, we pretty much mix it red and red and white, so if they do theirs like blue or green or something very different. Then we have no blue hydrant, they're
Yeah.
yellow.
Okay, I just wanna make sure we address 6 Bates and then we can go.
Yeah, so I can update you on the deal with 6 Bates.
Okay, has she got a plumber up there to look for?
It's also, yeah, so we went out, I ended up going, she actually had 2 leaks, her hot water tank overflow was dripping in the basement, and then we figured out, actually, so this is interesting, her toilet was running.
She said it wasn't.
Well, so, yeah, I don't know, I heard it, there was grit stuck in the valve, but what's
Okay.
fascinating is I ran a report from the meter.
Yeah,
Guess when that incident started?
when?
October 16th, which is the date of our water main break. So it's probably
It did some.
kicked some crap up in the
Got a
line.
water hammer.
Okay, well, the.
Flood. So it's been fixed, it very clearly leaked, you know, per policy.
The issue then is her bill more than doubles the last quarter.
Oh, like, you know, do the math. So she went from, sure, her bill is like 200, 300,
The normal
3,000.
policy.
God.
The normal policy, we're also dealing with an elderly person on a fixed income.
Yeah.
And the normal policy, who contacted both Dan and I, because, technically she lives across the street from me.
Yeah, so what do? We do.
Well, the normal policy is if they get it fixed, and it's, the only time this has ever happened, we abate the increase.
So,
Okay.
yeah, the policy that,
So
I
you
think
bill
Finn
for the
brought it to
average.
us, we said we'd use the last 3 quarters average and abate that amount, so effectively it works out, it would be an abatement of $343.41, which would mean she's effectively being billed, the average is, hang on, I wrote it down. The average number would be 304 instead of 3,000, so we'd be abating 2,700 cubic feet of water, which is clearly the overage.
Okay, $343.41.
So the number, I think we would vote on the number, which is 343.41.
I'll make a motion to grant the abatement for 6 Bates Road as prepared by Dan.
I think, sorry, the complete bill was 46.57,
Okay,
just for context.
yeah,
For the abatement amount of, for the amount of 27.
343.41.
$343.41 in dollars.
Yes, 343 at the top.
Okay, second, all in favor? Roy,
Roy, aye.
Brendan, aye.
Okay.
Move to adjourn the meeting.
Just,
Uh,
sorry, next
okay.
date,
Oh,
only because we're now getting into,
budget season,
well, not budget, it's I'm booked.
all
So
right,
I think our traditional beginning of March date, I'm not available.
all right.
Our beginning of April date, I'm not available.
Well,
So
when are you available in March?
I think tentatively the next, if we're sticking with
Oh,
Thursdays,
Yeah.
the next Thursday I have available is the, sorry, give me a second, it may not even be the 20th.
Holy shit, yeah. We'll do it, if we can't do a Wednesday.
But there's not, I mean, if there's nothing pressing.
I don't know when
wait
our
till
budget
April.
hearing is.
Wellesley, March 20th, I'm booked March 20th.
You know when our
Um,
budget hearing is?
I'm not sure yet, I spoke with Jeremy,
I saw the
um,
selectmen's agenda.
oh, we did it for the budget, the enterprise budget.
We approved it the last meeting?
No, you said you wanted to wait on that one.
Yeah, we don't have it on the agenda for tonight.
Yeah, it is,
Oh,
but if you're good with what was emailed,
Right. I reviewed it already, I'm good with it, so I'll make a motion to approve the budget if
I believe
Kevin's reviewed it.
Yes.
the select board tentative plan is to have meetings in March, I think he said Mondays actually, and then a Wednesday.
They already have them scheduled on the latest agenda.
He hasn't, yeah, so I think,
I just can't do Tuesday.
yeah, my guess is, I'm gonna try and talk to him, see if I can do a Monday.
Wait a minute, let's take a vote on the budget.
Yeah,
All in favor of the proposed budget?
Roy, aye.
Brendan, aye, that's passed.
Okay, good. Actually, we're kicking ass tonight.
I mean,
And we did the 6 Bates vote, so.
See what happens.
All right, when are you available in March?
Honestly, right now, the 27th.
Oh, God.
If it's a Thursday,
Can we do a
It's
Wednesday?
a Thursday?
Can we do a Wednesday?
I can't do any Wednesdays.
Can we do a Tuesday?
I can't, well,
I can do Tuesday. You
I'm
can-
limited on Tuesdays, since I have my meetings in Sudbury.
Yeah,
All right.
well, we could wait until April.
No.
But
I don't want to let it go that far.
Can't be doing it.
I will tell you, as soon as we get a budget night, I will go with you.
Yeah, well,
So can you do Tuesday, so,
can we do a Monday?
I can do
I
Mondays.
can do a Monday, and I can do a Tuesday as long as, because
I mean, there's March 3rd, but that could be a budget meeting. Let me hang on, 3, 5, 10,
Do a Monday.
3, 5,
Why don't we do this?
5, no, wait, let's let him get the schedule out.
Let's talk to Jeremy and see if you can pin down our budget date,
Yeah,
and we could schedule a meeting that night.
Are you guys available, even if we did remote, to meet during the day?
I am.
Like for like an hour?
I am.
Are you able to get away a little bit?
I can, remote, I can.
Remote, yes.
Assuming nobody has to meet with us, that's a backup.
I am not available in the day on March 6, 7, 13, and 14.
So
Okay.
Dan, I could Tuesday, I could do March 11th, that's on a Tuesday.
I put the morning open, not the afternoon.
Okay.
Just a backup plan, if we, if we can't get a night meeting. If
Well,
there's something that has to be
I still think
Yeah,
a better idea would be to, see if you can talk to Jeremy and find out what our budget day is. And schedule it before and after and around it,
Yeah,
and then you can just notify us.
yeah,
And you and I can meet in the daytime on most days.
absolutely.
So, I mean, there's only a
I
couple of
can
select
cover time.
days, there's only a couple of select days that are not available, the 6th, 7th, 13th, and 14th.
Yeah.
I'm gonna train
Especially a
class
virtual
that day.
meeting, yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, and I'd rather do it remote.
Yeah, me too, okay. So,
Is that okay, so we'll hold off on scheduling until
yeah,
each
till we
other?
hear back from Dan.
That makes sense, Dan?
yeah, I think that's fine, I think, hopefully,
And then, I know you're flat out most nights making money.
it doesn't stop.
Be glad.
It's great.
It's when you have nothing to do that you worry.
You know? What are you doing? Oh, motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor,
Roy, aye.
President, I adjourned at 8:28.
Good, yeah.